morning. This video will answer the question, are bastards, so scatterbred dogs from different type of breeds, the healthiest dogs there are? First off, we will discuss a little bit about the basis of this hypothesis, and then we go more in depth. So first off, the base of this hypothesis is that scatterbred dogs are the combination of different types of dogs and therefore are genetically more diverse and therefore better because they have a broader genetic base. And why is that? Because many times if you breed within a breed, then you select on, for example, external features, and to have them very emphasized. For example, the English Bulldog now has a very flat face and very broad chest, whereas when it was still a working dog it looked completely different. So it's based on external features without working capacity. That's one. And then the other thing is that the book is closed, so they only breed within one breed. So the genetic base will become less and less diverse. That's the reason, because also they want those dogs to be shown within one standard. So again, limiting diversity. And if you have some dogs that are very good, those dogs are of course more used, but very good in this sense is more focused at very good visually, externally. So then if you crossbreed again, you can decrease this amount of genetic limitations by introducing new blood. That's the reason. And very often, that's the second part of this hypothesis, if you look at the first generation breeds between two types of dogs, very often these types of dogs are very strong compared to the parent breeds, because that's a phenomenon known as heterosis, because they are so genetically different that they help each other a lot. The second and third generation, you oftentimes see a decrease in that again, because of course there are diminishing returns, because the genetic base is already quite diverse to begin with the first cross. So that gives you a little bit of background, and then we go a little bit more in depth to also solve these issues. So another thing that I briefly touched upon is that many dogs nowadays are only bred for show purposes externally, being an easy house dog and a dog that shows to be within the standard of breeding, and they like that, and those standards are oftentimes exaggerated further and further over time to further discriminate between all these different types of dogs. All the dogs came from one type of dog, namely a wolf, and then they have differentiated them to the highest degree possible within certain breeds. Also oftentimes limiting, for example, colorations to further limit the genetic base as a result. Now, then if you look at those bastard breeds, scatterbred dogs, streetdogs, very oftentimes these dogs are the result of, how do you say this, accidents. Because they are not carefully selected to be bred to each other, but it just happens. And then they say nature knows best, because that's one thing that could be beneficial in the street dog. Oftentimes the stronger dogs have a higher chance of reproducing as compared to the not so strong dogs. That's a beneficial trait then for being a street dog. But this can be completely different from being a bastard. Of course, there's a difference. Street dogs have to defend for themselves, especially if it's for multiple generations. Then you get oftentimes a little bit stronger dogs again, because the weak don't survive. So that's the difference between street dogs or wild dogs, so to say. Of course, those are even to a higher degree able to fend for themselves and even hunt for themselves, which is harder than it is to just eat the trash of human beings and get fed by human beings, being a street dog. So it gives you a little bit of background why some natural processes could help, of course, to get a little bit better dogs, and also the selection, the genetic limitation that people set upon the dogs is then also reduced, because the dogs themselves, they didn't see it in that limitations. That being said, why I think that street dogs, and especially bastard dogs, are not the strongest and not the healthiest breed, is that there are some things to consider. On bastard dogs, normally people don't take time and effort to use genetic tests. So genetic tests or other health tests are costing money, and lately you're now able to look at all kinds of breed-specific characteristics and see if the dog is healthy or not. It will cost an amount of money, sometimes even a very big amount of money, but it's an ability that you can use. I'm not saying that all breeds, show breeds, are using them. I'm not saying that, of course not. Many times they just want to make money, and they also want to have a story to tell why the dog looks like that, and not put too much attention on the dog and its limitations. But it's an opportunity, and they will more often use it on specific breeds that have value than on scatterbred dogs. That's one. The other thing is, sometimes breeds have specific detrimental traits. So, for example, hip dysplasia. But if you combine that with a very heavy type of dog from another breed, you can only exaggerate, because you have then weak hips, and you combine it with a heavy dog that, for example, also has other problems. And then you will stack the bad things upon each other. So the benefit of genetic testing is there. And also, because you know the breed, you can also know its weaknesses. So it's not completely random, and you can have a more focused approach. With a scatterbred breed, it's very hard to know that. Then there's the thing that oftentimes people throw the dogs that of a breed that are not that good on the street, or let nature do its thing without any consideration. And it's different with a purpose-bred dog. So that being said, let's summarize. I think show breeds are often weaker than bastard breeds. Less carefully selected and also tested, then they could have some benefits there. But the genetic diversity of bastard breeds often helps solve it, especially if the show breed is extremely exaggerated. I've made some examples in the past. For example, English Bulldog, the pug dog, also very often Dachshunds with their very weak back. If you combine that with weak hips, or a very big body, you have quite a recipe for disaster, of course. But then there's something else. There are also working dogs, like the dogs I have here. They're working bred. Those dogs are there to perform a duty, a very hard duty to say, namely combat predators. So nature's strongest warriors for a specific size are competing with these small dogs that you see here. So, for example, foxes and badgers, sometimes even used on bigger animals like swines. So that dictates for a strong, healthy dog, especially dogs that go on the ground, because the chest circumference is limiting the amount of dog that can go in. So they don't have an enormous big body, but they bring a lot of power with that. So they should be quite healthy to exploit the power and do it also for a longer duration of time. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that with performance type of dogs, we know for generation that they use strong or the strongest dogs that they had to their availability. So that's a benefit. And you can add upon that with health testing. And long story short, working dogs have the highest potential to be the healthiest type of dogs, in my opinion, especially if the work is harsh. Another benefit of working dogs is normally that the breeding books are not closed, so they are still breeding within breeds, but they know which breeds to combine and which breeds not to combine to keep the working capabilities intact. So I hope you like this video. Here see two Patterdale Terriers, a female and a male. Have a great day.